Hello, 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 my beautiful friends. I am feeling so much joy that I get to spend a little bit of time today talking about the sign of Sagittarius and getting us set up for a beautiful Sagittarius season ahead. I have to say right up front that this is one of my favorite energies. I happen to be a bit Sag rising, and I have a lot of beloved people in my life who have strong Sagittarius energy, and it has just played an important role in being an archetype that I have been able to develop a lot of my path through and via as I've explored it more deeply throughout my life. So I'll admit right up front that this is a sign that I feel a very deep connection to, but I also think that this is such a fun sign to explore. And so even for those of you who maybe aren't as connected with it, this will be a great conversation. You'll get a little deeper view and we'll get to peel back some of the layers of this powerful, beautiful sign. So today I'm going to do a little Sagittarius 101. We're going to get ourselves acquainted with this sign, peel back the layers, see some of the deeper meanings, some of the deeper archetypal ways we can work with this energy. I'm going to set us up for this particular Sagittarius season. We're going to go through some of the major themes I see for Sagittarius season 2022. I will also go through some of the major transits and how those are connecting so we get a real sense of the coming 4 weeks. And we'll finish our chat today with a few cards, a few intuitive messages, whatever wants to come through, add a little surprise and a little movement into our conversation. So let's get right into this conversation. So Sagittarius, this is the mutable fire sign. It is the 9th sign of the zodiac. So mutable fire is going to be so much about how we move and transition through life. Fire is very forward focused, so it's about how we're moving forward. And then of course, mutability is all about transitioning into new forms and exploring ourselves there. As the 9th sign, it is associated with concepts of philosophy, higher learning, languages, world travel, and really the big picture of things. So this is the idea sign. A lot of times, if we're thinking about the opposite side of Gemini, there's a lot of details and fiddling that's going on in the process of making something. Sagittarius energy is about when we get the big ideas, when a lot of large pieces come together. And this vision can be really helpful in moving through life. Sometimes we need to zoom out and think about the larger picture, soften our focus a little bit so that we can put unlikely pieces together. So this sign is very focused on that. It is a sign ruled by Jupiter, the big old planet of this solar system. So it has a lot to do with expanding our horizons. For me, it's not so much about like expansion as far as gaining more and more and more stuff in our lives or climbing a ladder as much as it is about expanding past the familiar. So stepping outside of our usual thresholds, stepping into something that feels truer, but maybe a little unfamiliar at first. And finally, this sign is connected to the imagery of the centaur. The constellation itself is connected to a centaur, and this idea is really interesting for me because, a centaur is, of course, part human, part horse, and there's this flavor with Sagittarius, which is about combining two worlds, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But there's a free-spiritedness to this energy that is about wanting to run free and be part of the wild natural world while also being very intellectual. And I think that combination of those two is so fun and so true to what it really feels like to be a human. And so for this reason, I love this sign, like I said. So some of the Sagittarius stereotypes, y'all know I love to do this for each season. And it took me a minute. I had to think about stereotypes because I'm so in it. I had to step outside of myself, step outside of my love and crush on this sign and kind of see it from fresh perspectives. But a lot of times Sagittarians will be teased for these things, being loud and opinionated. Sagittarians are often teased for being unreliable, so they may not show up on time. They don't like to commit to things. These are the stereotypes. They may not like to commit to things, relationships, long-term goals. They kind of get an idea, they go want to do something else. Sagittarians are often teased for having about 100 projects going all at the same time. I'm so guilty of that one. Is it a stereotype? I guess it is, but also I think a lot of Sages out there can relate. A lot of times Sages will be teased for being too free-spirited, a little too hard to rely on or lock down, right? I think, as with all fire signs, Sages are often teased for being annoying. I think all three fire signs, their stereotypes have to do with taking up all the space in the room. And I think another funny stereotype for Sages is that they're always the one in the room who's like waxing poetic and having like a philosophical little speech that they might be giving, pumping people up, or just getting into like weird topics that they're really interested in. I find all of these stereotypes to be so endearing in a way, but those are of course just the surface level fun, frothy things that we see. Sag on a deeper level, wow. Every time I sit with this archetype and I move into its deeper layers, I am just blown away by the imagery and by how useful it can be to work with this. Because essentially for me, Sagittarius energy is about alchemy. It's about alchemizing our lives. It's about alchemizing our spirit with our body, our mind with our spirit. It's about taking these different parts of ourselves, experiencing the non-physical, for example, going through a lot of experiences where we may be walking through spiritual doorways inside of ourselves with our physical experience, finding a way for these two to be bridged together. When you think about the imagery associated with tarot and Sagittarius, the tarot card that represents Sagittarius is Temperance. And Temperance is often depicted as an angel along this river with two cups and is pouring liquid from one cup into the other. And that temperance idea, it's from a Latin root that means to mix or to blend. Now, when we think about the centaur, right, we're blending the human part of ourselves with the very free-spirited, wanting to run free horse animal part of ourselves that's connected to the natural world. And we also have this idea of temperance, blending or mixing two things together. For me, this sign is really connected to after maybe we have gone through something deeply spiritual. Maybe we have connected some dots. Maybe we have gone through some visions, seen some things, or moved through a very deep, harrowing part of life that is connected with us with something deeper and truer on the spiritual, non-physical level. This sign is really connected to how we incorporate that into our physical life and how we find a balance between these two worlds. And rather than feeling like we have to divvy them up into these little boxes, this is about being able to bring them together. This idea of separation that is so ingrained in our culture is challenged here in the Sagittarian archetype. Like I mentioned as well, Sagittarius for me is about stepping beyond our comfort zone, stepping beyond our familiar little world that we may have been raised in. We may have been raised in a certain vision of what love is supposed to mean or what success is supposed to mean. But Sagittarius is really an archetype you want to work with when you are challenging some of those norms. You're wanting to step out of the framework of the familiar, because this is an archetype that is very much about when we go to somewhere new. We don't know the language yet. We don't know how to step next because we're learning so many new things. And this can happen not just literally when we travel the world, but when we leave a family system, for example, or when we leave a cultural script, or when we take a path that is our own. Sagittarius archetype is really great to work with if you are going through a life transition that involves leaving behind a familiar script or a familiar format or template. And this is also a really powerful archetype to work with. Like I said, if you have just been through a season where you have felt a little bit more detached from your physical human form and have been out in spirit world, or vice versa, where maybe you've been feeling a lot more in your physical world and not so connected to spirit, this is a really great sign and season to reconnect those pieces of ourselves and to find that they are working in harmony and together and want to help us create new visions and ideas. I think one of the final important things to think about with Sagittarian energy is that this is a sign associated with this idea of optimism. But of course, optimism often gets misdefined, I would say. I don't know if that's a word. Is misdefined a thing? So a lot of times it will get lumped in with this idea of always being happy, always looking on the bright side, always glass half full, kind of go, 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 manic energy that's very American, very age of the internet, very internet spirituality, right? But optimism at its core, at its root, is about our ability to be inventive with what we have at hand. And I think sometimes that even gets co-opted into this kind of idea of being like a CEO and climbing the ladder because I made something out of nothing and I worked with what I had, and I don't want to go there either. I think when I think about optimism and working with what we have, like working with the ideas we have, it's actually a lot quieter and subtler. It's really about being able to see the elements we have within ourselves and around us, and to work with them in a way that isn't necessarily about dominating the world or having a successful business. We may be working with the elements we have around us to live a quieter life, to live something that's truer to us, that's simplifying something, that's taking pressure off. We may be putting ideas together because we are an artist and we want to create something brand new, and we may have limited resources, so we work with a medium that we normally wouldn't work with. There's a lot of ways that optimism can show up, but I think I want to take it out of this range of constant self-improvement and constant happiness and chasing after that, and more think about it as a much quieter pursuit of something truer and something that allows us to really honor what we're working with right here in the moment. I think Sagittarius energy is much more associated with this concept of bittersweetness as well. In our Patreon group, the first book we did on our book club was the book Bittersweet by Susan Cain, if you want to check that out. But she talks a lot about there being this feeling that's so essential to life, that is this joyful and this painful feeling that we have in the beauty of experiencing something beautiful, and then also knowing it will pass away or not stay forever. And I think Sagittarius, even though we think about it as the happy-go-lucky sign, is the sign when it's in its most effective state, is one that has accepted this bittersweetness and therefore moves through life in a more whole and harmonious way that allows vision to open up. So there's a lot there. I feel like I was just scratching the surface with some of the things I'm just mentioning here in working with Sagittarius on a deeper level. It'd be fun to explore the Temperance card, see how you're feeling about that card, the sign of the symbolism of centaur, as well as this idea of alchemizing. Those are all themes you could have fun exploring this season. Now, themes for this season. Let's get into Sag season 2022 specifically, because this is a beautiful season. I'm really enjoying the way that it's kind of shaping up. So some of just the overarching themes. One is going to be releasing pent-up emotions in healthy ways, especially if you've had some frustration, some fatigue, or even some anger building up. This is a great season to shake it out of your body, stretch it out, release some of your tension from your voice. And like I said, pent-up emotion in healthy ways. This is not about going out and picking a fight. It's about allowing things to move through so that we create spaciousness for what is next. Sag is also very deeply tied to hips and thighs. So this is also, like I said in Scorpio season, this season is also going to be a wonderful time to stretch, to move, to release any tension you might have in your hips. Visions of who we are becoming is the next theme. Sagittarius energy will almost always have a flavor of, like I said, zooming out, seeing the big picture, and thinking about the larger path. And this can often mean that we get flashes of insight about who we are becoming beyond who we have always known ourselves to be. And those may not always make sense, but there will be a lot of kind of these visionary moments just coming in. So just creating some space for that. I recommend writing them down, even if they make no sense and you don't know what to do with them. Another important theme this particular Sagittarius season is going to be letting go of the definitions of this is who I am, this is me, that are holding us captive. We This is a great season to loosen up on some of the ways we may categorize or label ourselves, to re-examine them, and to loosen up where things have shifted within ourselves. This is one of the last, seasons of the year. It's the last full zodiac sign season of 2022 because, of course, Capricorn modulates us into 2023. So this is also just like a natural and innate part of the year where we're kind of looking around at who we are and who we are becoming. Reevaluating our philosophy about the world is going to be the next theme. So because Sag is so much about the big picture, this is a really great time to notice, kind of what your core beliefs are about the world and how you're feeling with those. Exploring, seeing how it's going. And finally, I think this is such a beautiful one, and one that I think a lot of us are longing for, is where things don't need to be heavy, let them be light. This is something I need to work on. Of course, some things just have like a weight and an intensity that it's a little hard to be like, it's light. But there's a lot of things we take very seriously, making sure that the dishes are put away, or, that's my thing. Whatever it may be, right? Like there's these things in our daily lives that we may be really holding some tension on. This is a great season to play around with it and see what you can hold lightly, what you're allowed to hold lightly, and take some things less seriously where there's space to do so. This is a great season to practice that and give yourself that gift. So let's talk about the transits that we'll be working with for this Sagittarius season. It's a really, really beautiful and multi-layered Sagittarius season when it comes to transits. The sun enters Sag on November 22nd. And right after that, on November 23rd, we have this new moon in Sagittarius. Now, this is a really harmonious and beautiful new moon, and I already have that video out if you want to look at it, but it is very gentle, it's very hopeful, it's very open, and it happens at the same time that Jupiter is stationing direct in Pisces. And this is part of what influences that Sagittarius new moon. These two things together create this kind of open, visionary, light feeling in this new moon. So it's a great way to take some pressure off. It also officially closes out our eclipse season by giving us some finality through that last lunar season, that last lunar cycle that we had with the two eclipses. So it closes that out and gives us a breath and some spaciousness to feel through where we are now. I love it. And then things are kind of calm that last week of November. December 3rd, Neptune goes direct in Pisces. Neptune goes retrograde for many months every single year. It's been in Pisces for many, many, many years. So when Neptune goes direct, there's a shift from Neptune retrograde is actually helps us to see the world as it is a little bit more clearly in traditional astrology. So when it goes direct again, it actually amplifies the dreamy, fantastical version of the world. Now that can be really, really nice because I think it's important to see the world as it is and to be grounded and to be able to discern. That's a really powerful thing, of course. But it's also okay to modulate back into some of the fantasy and some of the fantasticalness. It's a natural placement for Neptune in Pisces. And so we'll be getting a little bit more of that dreamy, floaty energy coming back in once we get into December. Mercury is going to have been in Sag for the first few weeks of this season, which is going to amplify playfulness, storytelling, pulling ideas together, connecting dots. It's a really, really fun, playful thing. And then Mercury moves into Capricorn, and the focus is going to be on practical ways to move forward in life. Capricorn gets such a rap for being kind of no fun, and we'll have fun with Capricorn for the next season's discussion. But Capricorn's so useful. It can really help us to just be like that problem that's been lingering in the back of our minds and we just have not wanted to look at it can get resolved with the help of Capricorn's energy. So Mercury moving into Capricorn can be fantastic for clearing out some of those nagging to-do lists that have been waiting for a while. Then on December 7th, we're going to have our full moon of this Sagittarius season, a full moon in Gemini. And I have some things to say about this because it's a moon and Mars conjunct full moon. And because of that, there's going to be a lot of messaging out there that this is going to be a very agitated, insecure full moon that's going to feel very jittery and stressful. But what's really happening here is that we're going to be asked to make space to move through healthy emotions, feel emotions that need to be felt. So just giving yourself a little space around the time of this full moon to make sure that you have the space and the breath to feel emotions that need to move through at this time. That's going to be a really great full moon for that. Venus, who has also been in Sagittarius for most of this season, and amplifying playfulness, joyfulness, curiosity in our relationships and how we love, getting a little playful and spicy, is moving into Capricorn on December 9th. And for me, Venus in Capricorn is so much about how do we feel safe and loved and seen, about amplifying a sense of stability and deep care in our relationships. And then on December 20th, right at the end of the Sag season, Jupiter is going to move forward back into Aries. And that is going to open up a continuation of healing around this idea of me and I am, and how we use that as armor, and how we want to maybe dissolve some of those old containers and open up into what is new. And then, of course, on the 21st, the sun moves into Capricorn, the solstice happens, and we are no longer in Sagittarius season. So there's a lot there. We'll be going through that, and I'll be doing weekly chats about this over on my Patreon if you are looking for some cozy conversations where I'm able to get into a lot more detail about each of these transits and how they work and how they feel. I'd love to see you there. Let's get into the intuitive messages that want to come through for this beautiful season. 5 of Pentacles right up front. Okay. I love it. Oh, a card fell. Queen of Pentacles. Very interesting to have so much pentacle energy in a fire sign season. Yeah. Knight of Cups. Dreamy. And 3 of Pentacles. Wow. Okay. So it's interesting for me, having all these pentacles. Foundations. Foundations are important. Our foundational beliefs, the foundations of how we treat ourselves. I know that Sag it's a mutable fire sign, right? Which means it's very playful and kind of free flowing, and can be associated sometimes more with that daydreamy, playful energy. But I think actually, because it has to do with our philosophy, the way we envision our place in the cosmology of the world, that actually ties very deeply into our sense of place in the world and how we connect to it and what our foundations look like. So sometimes things that look like they're one thing on the surface, right, one type of energetic, can actually be a direct link to a completely different one. And so let's get into these cards specifically. So 5 of Pentacles is really interesting. For me, when this card shows up, it's important that we think about the places where we feel we have a story about ourselves or a feeling about ourselves as being alienated or cast out of something. Or unworthy of something. This goes to deep places. 5 of Pentacles definitely asks us to look at the places where maybe we feel alienated from the divine, where we feel, for those of us who are raised in more Christian traditions, and I can't speak for everybody, of course, a lot of us were raised with a feeling of this punishing father figure, where there's always a sense of alienation or possible alienation that can happen if we aren't living, kind of that Calvinist idea of an earned life. And so a lot of us who have training in that tradition will have to work with the 5 of Pentacles throughout our lives to develop a different worldview around what our connection with our own spirit and value is. And that's what 5 of Pentacles asks for here. And like I said, this is a philosophical energetic. Sagittarius is. So it's going to have us looking at those places where we may have kind of ingrained philosophies about our value and about our ability to be here in this world in a valuable way. So something to explore. I think on the other extreme end of this, we have the Queen of Pentacles, right? If you look at these two, they're in very different energies. And the Queen of Pentacles is so connected to finding our feet underneath us. And to finding our center. Of course, the Queen of Pentacles on her shadow side can also be a little too obsessive about maintaining the status quo and like keeping things the way that they are. But the healthier kind of beauty of Queen of Pentacles is finding our footing underneath us, finding a stable way to love ourselves into our lives and to simplify and find harmony. So it kind of goes back to what I was saying about a major theme of Sagittarius season, which is where things can be lighter and simpler, let them be. I think Queen of Pentacles is not about making a whole bunch of flashy big moves on the surface, but about really getting honest with where we want to put our energy and how we are using that energy and giving ourselves the honor and the dignity to hear that out fully. As we get into the second half of Sag season, as we move into December, we have these beautiful cards. So the Knight of Cups, the Dreamer, the Poet, the Romantic. This makes me think about Neptune going direct in Pisces. It really brings back this Knight of Cups energy. This energy, of course, if we rode the poet energy all the way through life, we may not always pull through on all the commitments and things and make things a reality in the physical, of course. But Knight of Cups can be so beautiful for reconnecting to our dreamy self, the self that is the poet and the artist, and to give that more space in our lives. Also amplifying romantic things in your life, if you know, and that can be dating yourself, it can be dating other people. It can be, you know, for those of us in long-term relationships, Knight of Cups also signals a time to amplify cozy romantic environments and to make art and beauty and to give a little bit of our life force to that element of ourselves. And then closing out this Sagittarius season as energy starts to move into Capricorn, we have the Three of Pentacles, which is about not having to do things alone. You know, when I look at the first card we have here at Five of Pentacles, for me, this card is often about kind of how we feel alone, even though there are two figures here, right? The symbolism here is feeling that we are locked out, we are left out of something, and we kind of have to struggle on alone with no help. Whereas the Three of Pentacles is about how we create more beauty in the world by allowing others to see us and help us, by allowing others to offer up their skill sets, and then in turn offering up our special skill sets and recognizing what those are. So there's an emphasis here on not isolating too much with things we may be moving through, allowing all of us to bring our different skill sets. So this is a great time if you have a project and you're trying to do it all alone and you don't want to ask for help and you don't want anybody to know that you're struggling. This is going to be at the end of the season. You may be finding that it's a really wonderful time to invite trusted, beautiful people to help you with that. And there's going to be an amplification in that kind of coming together to solve problems energy moving through. So I'm so intrigued and excited about Sag season. I often find it is a really deep season. There's a lot going on there. There are a lot of depths and layers that can be explored during this time. It is getting properly dark up here in the north. So by the time we get to the end of Sag season, we are going to be having very short days here in Sweden. So I'm wishing you all such a beautiful Sagittarius season. Like I mentioned, I walk us through really more detailed weekly chats for my patrons. So I'd love to see you there. It is such a beautiful community and it's a wonderful way to support me so that I can keep doing this work here. You can also find me on my Instagram and my website, so I'll leave all those links below so you know where to find me. I would love it if you stuck around. We have so much fun planned ahead in this space, and we have so many amazing, powerful conversations up ahead. I will see you in the very near future. Have a beautiful Sagittarius season.